Subscribe because it is free.
The marble pillars of the Galactic Tribunal stretched impossibly high, carved with the achievements of 1,000 civilizations. In the center of this cosmic courthouse sat Judge Supreme Vortak, his 12 tentacles draped ceremoniously over the obsidian bench. Today's defendant? The entire human race. High Chancellor Xiweixthala of the pristine collective rose from her gleaming chrome podium, her translucent skin practically glowing with self-righteousness. She smoothed her spotless robes and began her prosecution with the precision of a surgical laser. "Esteemed beings of the Galactic Council," she announced, her voice carrying the authority of someone who had never been wrong about anything, ever. "We gather today to address the menace known as humanity." She pronounced it like a particularly unpleasant medical condition. The evidence hologram flickered to life, displaying Earth's greatest hits of destruction. Nuclear explosions, oil spills, and something that looked suspiciously like a McDonald's commercial played in slow motion. "Observe their reckless use of nuclear energy," Xiweixthala continued, completely butchering the pronunciation. "They create weapons from the very forces that power stars, then store them like children hoarding candy." From the jury box, the crystalline hierarchs clicked their approval. Their geometric heads rotated in perfect 90-degree increments as they processed the information. "Clearly," announced their spokesman, a being who looked like an angry diamond, "these creatures lack proper angular thinking. Their cities have curved roads." Curved? What manner of chaos is this? The Hive Mind Collective buzzed among themselves, which was particularly impressive since they were technically one consciousness. "Individual decision-making is the root of all problems," they declared in unison, then immediately began arguing with themselves about whether that statement was too absolute. "We disagree with ourselves," they added helpfully. "But we also agree that we disagree, which means we actually agree, unless we don't." The ancient ethereals, floating in their meditation crystals like cosmic fortune cookies, nodded sagely. "In our 15 million years of existence," wheezed their eldest representative, "we have observed many species rise and fall. Humans display the classic signs of adolescent civilization: emotional decision-making, territorial disputes over trivial resources, and an inexplicable fondness for fermented grain discs covered in lactose secretions." "Pizza," whispered Ambassador Jennifer Collins from the defense table, wincing as the translation made her favorite food sound like biological warfare. Dr. Marcus Webb adjusted his glasses nervously, scrolling through his tablet of carefully prepared arguments about human art and philosophy. Beside him, legal aide Tommy Nguyen frantically tried to fix their holographic projector, which kept displaying upside-down images of the Mona Lisa looking like she was having a stroke. Furthermore, Xiweixthala continued, warming to her theme, "Humans demonstrate catastrophic diplomatic incompetence. They shake hands, a primitive ritual involving the exchange of bacterial cultures. They make facial expressions to convey meaning, as if advanced beings haven't evolved past such crude body language. And they breathe loudly. Very distracting in negotiations." The gallery erupted in amused chittering. Representatives from the vapor beings condensed slightly with what might have been laughter. The silicon-based confederacy clinked together like wind chimes in a hurricane. Even the usually stoic plant parliament rustled their leaves in amusement. Judge Vortak's tentacles writhed with barely contained anticipation. The verdict was a foregone conclusion. "The court proposes immediate quarantine of the Sol system for 50,000 years, he rumbled, his voice carrying the weight of cosmic authority. "This should provide adequate time for either human extinction or evolution into something less problematic." The betting pool among the spectators reached fever pitch. The smart money was on extinction within the first century. Humans, after all, seemed determined to prove Darwin wrong by surviving despite their obvious inadequacy. As Vortak raised his primary tentacle to pronounce judgment, the massive courtroom doors suddenly exploded inward with a sound like a freight train hitting a symphony orchestra. Jake Morrison stumbled through the smoking doorframe, toolbox in one hand, half-eaten bologna sandwich in the other. His maintenance jumpsuit bore the battle scars of countless repairs, grease stains that told stories, duct tape patches that held the universe together, and a name tag that read Jake in block letters because aliens apparently couldn't handle cursive. "Well, ain't this fancy," he muttered, surveying the cathedral-like courtroom with the casual appreciation of someone who'd seen bigger crowds at a county fair. Y'all having some kind of costume party? Because I gotta tell you, the air recycling system in here is making a noise like a dying whale. The entire courtroom fell silent. 12,000 of the galaxy's most sophisticated beings stared at this grease-stained human who just interrupted the trial of the millennium. Judge Vortak's tentacles froze mid-gesture, as if someone had paused the universe's most important moment. Who dares interrupt these sacred proceedings? Vortak boomed, his voice carrying enough authority to topple governments. Jake looked around, genuinely confused. Oh, you talking to me? Sorry about the door, by the way. Your security system doesn't play nice with human tech. I was just trying to fix that busted air filter in the ventilation shaft when I took a wrong turn. He held up his sandwich apologetically. Want half? It's bologna, but don't let that fool you. My wife makes a mean sandwich. The pristine collective prosecutor recoiled as if Jake had offered her a live grenade. This creature is contaminating our sterile environment with processed meat products and petroleum-based lubricants. Hey now, Jake said, genuinely hurt. I showered this morning. Well, yesterday morning. Time's weird out here in space. He noticed the three humans at the defense table looking like they'd rather be anywhere else in the galaxy. Y'all look like someone stole your lunch money. What's got everyone so worked up? Ambassador Collins cleared her throat, her diplomatic training warring with pure panic. Mr. Morrison, this is the Galactic Tribunal. We're on trial. The entire human race. Jake blinked slowly, processing this information like a computer running on dial-up internet. Come again. They're putting all of us on trial? For what, exactly? Being human, apparently, Dr. Webb whispered. That's the dumbest thing I've ever heard, Jake announced to the courtroom with the confidence of a man who'd once told his drill sergeant that his plan needed work. And I once watched a guy try to fix a plasma leak with chewing gum. The crystalline hierarchs rotated their heads in perfect unison, a gesture that would have been intimidating if Jake had been paying attention. Human, your species demonstrates consistent logical failures. Your thought processes are chaotic, unpredictable. Well, yeah, Jake agreed cheerfully. That's kind of the point. If everyone thought the same way, who'd be around to fix things when the smart plans don't work? He squinted at their geometric forms. Speaking of which, how do you folks handle emergencies? Do you just sit there calculating angles while the ship's on fire? The hierarch's perfect formation wavered slightly. This wasn't the cowering they'd expected. The hive mind collective buzzed with increasing agitation. Individual consciousness is inefficient. Your species wastes energy on personal desires and conflicting opinions. Yeah, but we get stuff done, Jake replied, pulling a wrench from his toolbox and casually tightening a loose bolt on a nearby railing that had been squeaking since the trial began. You ever try to get a group project finished when everyone has to agree on everything? Nothing gets done. Sometimes you just gotta pick a direction and go with it. The collective began arguing with themselves more intensely, their unified consciousness fracturing under the weight of Jake's simple observation. High Chancellor Zoaxthala stepped forward, her pristine robes practically glowing with indignation. This is highly irregular. Remove this contaminated individual immediately. Now hold on just a minute, Jake said, his voice carrying the kind of authority that came from 30 years of dealing with difficult customers and broken equipment. These folks were about to lock up my entire planet because we're not perfect? That seems a little harsh, don't you think? Judge Vortak's tentacles writhed with uncertainty. No defendant had ever addressed the court with such casual disrespect. It was either the height of arrogance or the depth of ignorance, and he couldn't decide which was more disturbing. Your Honor, Ambassador Collins interjected desperately. Perhaps we could. Ma'am, with all due respect, Jake interrupted gently. I think you've been trying to play their game by their rules. Maybe it's time we showed them how humans actually work. He turned back to the judge. So what's it gonna be, tentacle guy? You gonna hear what I have to say, or are you gonna judge us without getting the whole story? Judge Vortak's curiosity won out over protocol. Very well, human. You may speak, but be warned. Appreciate it, Your Honor, Jake said, pulling out a napkin covered in hastily scribbled notes. Now, I ain't gonna stand here and tell you we're perfect. Hell, I'd be lying through my teeth if I did. But I am gonna tell you why being imperfect is actually our superpower. The courtroom erupted in confused murmurs. Several aliens began frantically consulting their databases, searching for any reference to imperfection being classified as a strength. See, you folks have been talking about how aggressive we are, how reckless, how we can't follow proper diplomatic procedures. But let me ask you something. Jake pointed at the Hive Mind Collective. What happens when you get stuck in one of those logic loops? When you can't all agree on what to do? The collective's buzzing intensified. We process all available data until consensus is reached. And how long does that take? Anywhere from several hours to several decades, depending on the complexity. Right there, Jake interrupted. That's the problem. While you're sitting around debating whether to save the burning building or calculate the optimal water pressure, we'd already have people out with garden hoses, doing something. Maybe it ain't perfect, but at least nobody's barbecued while we're thinking about it. He turned to the crystalline hierarchs, who were still rotating their heads in mechanical precision. And you folks with your geometric thinking. That's real impressive and all, but what happens when life throws you a curveball? When the problem doesn't fit into your perfect angles? The lead hierarch's rotation stuttered. We adapt our calculations to accommodate irregularities. How long does that take? Approximately 47 standard time units for minor adjustments. See, that's your problem right there. You're so busy calculating the perfect solution that the problem's already moved on to something else. We humans, we see a problem, we try something. If it doesn't work, we try something else. We call it improvisation. Jake reached into his toolbox and pulled out 3 random items: a rubber tube, a metal clamp, and some electrical tape. Let's say your fancy space station's got a coolant leak. Emergency situation. How would each of you handle it? The pristine collective representative recoiled. We would immediately evacuate the contaminated area and summon proper repair specialists with sterile equipment. And if the specialists are 3 days away? We would maintain quarantine protocols until proper procedures could be implemented. So you just let the reactor overheat because you're too worried about getting your hands dirty? Jake didn't wait for an answer. He quickly assembled the 3 items into a makeshift coupling. Boom. Temporary fix. Won't win any beauty contests, but it'll hold until the fancy repair crew shows up. Sometimes good enough right now beats perfect next week. The ethereals floated forward, their ancient wisdom crackling with indignation. Young species, your short-term thinking demonstrates why longevity brings wisdom. We have observed patterns across millennia. Yeah, but how many of those patterns are still relevant? Jake asked. I bet you've got some real good advice about handling horse-drawn carriages, but what about fixing a quantum drive? Sometimes old wisdom becomes old baggage. The ancient ethereals began flickering uncertainly in their meditation crystals. Here's the thing about humans, Jake continued, warming to his theme. We're not afraid to look stupid. We're not afraid to fail. And that's exactly what makes us dangerous to problems. He gestured around the courtroom. You folks have spent so much time being perfect that you've forgotten how to be real. He walked over to the collective section. When's the last time one of you had an original thought? Just one mind, thinking something different. The collective's buzzing became increasingly frantic. Individual thoughts are inefficient, but sometimes the collective cannot process unprecedented situations. But individual consciousness is chaos. But there you go, Jake said gently. Sometimes you need a little chaos to shake things loose. He addressed the entire courtroom. You want to know what humanity's greatest strength is? We don't give up. We don't calculate optimal solutions. We don't wait for perfect conditions. We see something that needs fixing, and we grab whatever tools we've got and start swinging. Sometimes we hit our thumbs instead of the nail, but eventually we get the job done. Judge Vortak's tentacles writhed with something that might have been confusion or might have been respect. "This is highly irregular." "Yeah," Jake agreed. "That's us humans for you. Highly irregular. But we get results." The jury deliberation lasted exactly 47 seconds, which was either a galactic record or a complete breakdown of the judicial system. Judge Vortak's tentacles writhed in patterns that suggested deep contemplation, mild panic, and possibly indigestion. The crystalline hierarchs had stopped rotating entirely, their geometric perfection now looking more like frozen confusion. The hive mind collective was experiencing what could only be described as an existential crisis, arguing with themselves in 17 different languages simultaneously. The ancient ethereals flickered like dying light bulbs, their millennia of wisdom suddenly feeling like outdated software. "This is unprecedented," High Chancellor Zoexthala whispered, her pristine robes somehow less pristine after listening to Jake's defense. "We came here to judge a primitive species, not to question our own civilizational foundations." Meanwhile, Jake had wandered over to the courtroom's holographic display system and was casually rewiring something behind the main panel. "You folks mind if I fix this while you're thinking? It's been crackling something fierce this whole time." "Don't touch that," the court technician squeaked, a being that resembled a nervous mushroom. "That's a Class 7 Galactic Standard audio-visual matrix." "Yeah, well, your Class 7 whatever's got a loose connection in the tertiary feedback loop," Jake replied, elbow deep in alien circuitry. "Happens all the time with these fancy setups. You get so focused on the complex stuff, you forget to check if the basic connections are tight." As if to prove his point, the courtroom's audio system suddenly cleared, eliminating a background hum that everyone had learned to ignore. The holographic projectors stopped flickering. Even the lighting seemed brighter. "How did you?" the technician began. "Experience," Jake said simply. 30 years of fixing stuff that ain't supposed to break." Judge Vortak raised a tentacle for silence, though the courtroom was already quieter than a library during finals week. "The court has reached a most unusual conclusion. We gathered here today to determine humanity's fitness to join galactic civilization. Instead, we have discovered something far more significant." The gallery held its collective breath, which was impressive considering half the species present didn't actually breathe. Humanity stands accused of being chaotic, unpredictable, and imperfect. After careful consideration of the evidence presented by... Vortak paused, consulting his notes. "Maintenance technician Jake Morrison, this court finds these accusations to be completely accurate." Jake grinned. "Well, can't argue with that. However," Vortak continued, his voice carrying a weight that made the courtroom pillars vibrate, "we have also discovered that these qualities, which we considered flaws, may in fact be exactly what this galaxy needs." High Chancellor Zoexthala fainted. The sound of her hitting the pristine floor echoed through the chamber like a gavel strike. "The crystalline hierarchs have not innovated their technology in 10,000 years, Vortak observed. "The hive mind collective has spent centuries debating the same philosophical questions. The ancient ethereals reference wisdom so old it predates the problems we face today. And the pristine collective." He glanced at the unconscious prosecutor. "Well, they speak for themselves." The judge's primary tentacle pointed directly at Jake, who was now helping the court technician upgrade the entire audio system with parts from his toolbox. "Humanity brings something we have forgotten: the courage to be wrong, the wisdom to learn from failure, and the audacity to try anyway." "So what's the verdict?" Ambassador Collins asked, hardly daring to hope. "All charges dismissed," Vortak announced. "Furthermore, humanity is hereby invited to join the Galactic Council, not as junior members seeking our approval, but as teachers. We have much to learn from your imperfection." The courtroom erupted in chaos. Some aliens cheered, others protested, and the collective started arguing about whether this was a precedent or an anomaly. Through it all, Jake kept working on the sound system, occasionally offering technical advice to anyone who'd listen. "Does this mean I get a promotion?" Jake asked, emerging from behind the control panel with a satisfied grin. "Because I was just trying to fix an air filter when this whole thing started." 6 months later, Jake Morrison, now officially titled Chief Practical Solutions Advisor to the Galactic Council, was teaching a workshop called Advanced Problem Solving for Highly Intelligent Species. His first lesson was simple. Sometimes the best tool for the job is whatever you've got in your pocket. The galaxy, it turned out, had been overthinking things for millennia. All it took was one human with a toolbox and common sense to show them that perfection was overrated, but getting things done never went out of style.